Okay, hey everyone. So in this video, I wanted to quickly just introduce you to a new tool I've been working on, and really the focus of the tool is really for me to understand Golang as a back-end language, as a programming language, a little bit more than I have done over the last couple of years. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a developer, I'm not a programmer, but I like to think that I could get something built and get something done. Forgive the front end. The front end is a bit of a mess, but ultimately introducing Kollect. The idea around Kollect is to provide a way of being able to inventory your. To begin with, it was to provide an inventory of your Kubernetes clusters. So everything that comes with that. I'll show you what that looks like shortly. But actually, since then, I've added the ability to also get some of our AWS resources as well as our Azure. So I need to update this README, but ultimately it's a command line tool that actually has some additional stuff in there. So what I've done is if you go to git clone or go to Michael K Kollect, you'll get access to this, and I have that in our repository. I've git cloned that down to my local machine. You'll also find in the GitHub repo there's some releases in there. I've just been playing around with GitHub Actions, trying to learn how to cross-compile multiple different architectures so that we can just take the binary and start running that. So what this should look like is, let's start with what functions or what flags that we have available to us. So first of all, we have help. I only put this in this morning, and on there we have browser, which is going to open a web interface. I'll show you what that looks like. We've obviously got help. We've got an inventory string that enables an inventory flag that you then type in what you want to inventory. So that today could be Kubernetes, AWS, or Azure, with the default being Kubernetes. I do want to add other areas in here. So where we have Kubernetes, AWS, and Azure, I also want to add Google Cloud and then some other applications that I commonly use as well. Then we've got kubeconfig. So by default, it's going to go to your default path. So there it says Michael K, that's my default path, but ultimately in the code, it's going to go to your default path if a config file's there. If not, you can use --kubeconfig to your file, and that will use that. If you want to send everything out to JSON, which I'll show you shortly, we can do that as well by ---- or -output, and that will allow you to export everything out to a JSON file that is obviously portable from that. The other thing that I found is, and you'll see this shortly, is the storage flag. So if I was to write, or if I was to go, let's leave everything off. So we're going to, default inventory is going to be Kubernetes. And if I was to then go ---- browser, this is going to go and query that kubeconfig file in that local path, which is a physical Talus cluster. But you'll see here, there's actually so much going on, right? We've got all of our namespaces, we've got our pods, some namespaces and the status of those. All of these being pulled in by the Go CLI that we have from a Kubernetes point of view. The deployments that we have, the images that we have associated to those deployments, the stateful sets, the services, and some of the important information around cluster IP. Again, we could go even further and add some more detail there. As we go down, we've got persistent volumes, what storage class they're associated to, persistent volume claims, storage classes, and snapshots. So all good, but there's a lot of information there. If I did want to, we could just go, let's kill that, and we go to browser, but let's just say I wanted the storage. We can do that here, and it's just gonna, spoiler alert, it's just gonna display the stateful sets, the persistent volumes, the persistent volume claims, the storage classes, and the volume snapshot classes. Okay, so that is the Kubernetes side of things and the default. So what we can also do is we can leverage our inventory, and maybe it's Azure that we want to point to. Let's do that now. Notice how I've not put in any credentials to anything. I've told it about a kube config. Equally, from an Azure point of view, on this machine, on this system, I've set up the configuration for the Azure CLI, the AZ CLI, as well as the SDK. So that is going to use that. It's going to use that credential or that config management to get us into this. And it's going to start displaying what I have in that Azure account. Now, I don't have much in that Azure account. I have a VM where I'm testing Kollect. And actually, as part of this whole process, I do want to have some Terraform or some sort of automation code that will allow me to test, so that I have Azure VMs, I have whatever those resources may be. You can see here that I have storage accounts, blob containers, and virtual networks. Clearly, there's a load more stuff in Azure that we could use here. Okay, so then, for example, if we wanted to, I want to look at AWS, we can do that as well. So again, I don't have much in my AWS, maybe a little bit more, but again, I have a very simple test EC2 instance, I have some buckets, and I have some VPCs. Again, we can expand what that needs to look like as we get a bigger, as we have more resources in there, but the premise should be that, and that's where I need probably the community's help to be able to run this against a more busier environment and be able to export that that detail. So, okay, now the question was, what happens if I don't have a browser? I'm on a Ubuntu server and I don't have access to a browser. So we can knock this off, and what we're going to do here is from that inventory, we're going to get just a JSON output. Really quite hard to read, but yeah, you can see basically the same detail that we just saw up above. We can then use an output, and we can throw that into AWS data.json, and that's going to then put that into that file. If we do a ls, you'll see that should be there you go, and you can see that we've got that output, but I don't want that, so let's do that. Clear this. One of the other things on the help, if we just take a quick look, was to, again, obviously this depends whether you've got JQ installed. Most systems have it on there by default, but what we could do is we could run let's say an inventory of our Azure, and then let's pipe that out to JQ just to give us that same JSON, but it's going to use a prettier way of being able to read that. So exactly the same, but now we've got a little bit more detail about what that needs to look like. And I think the feedback from the community would be great, is where do we go next? What are we missing? I can only do so much from my own Azure and AWS and a physical Kubernetes cluster. What else should we do? I like the idea of implementing some sort of cost into that as well, potentially using some APIs. But yeah, really what I wanted to do was just, I've tweeted this a little bit about Kollect, but never really done an overview video of it and shared that out. So yeah, let me know what you think. We have a few issues already on the GitHub page as well. Just to give you some of those ideas. So one was about being able to import that JSON. So I've already gathered all of that on a previous run. I want to see what that looks like, and maybe there is some sort of comparison that we can use later on as well. Command line report, showing data usage within the PVC, so being able to dive in and understand what that usage looks like. Again, that's going to be useful when it comes to cost analysis, if that's where we want to go with that. Yeah, let me know what you think. Awesome.